Welcome everyone in this new webinar. After a short summer break, we are back with webinars here for you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on this wonderful planet. Today, in this webinar, we are going to have a look at syntax highlighting memos for Delphi developers. On the agenda of today, first, a brief introduction, then the first part of the webinar will be all about the VCL specific version of syntax highlighting memo, and then we will switch to the FNC version, which is a cross-platform syntax highlighting memo, and we will conclude this webinar with some advice in what situation to use the which memo the best. And of course, there will also be time for your questions and answers. So first of all, an introduction into the syntax highlighting memos. What are the memos about? So it's all about language syntax-based coloring of text to make your code, or for example, also SQL statements, JSON data, etc., to make that more readable to the eye by applying specific colors to specific elements that are in the memo. For code, the concept of code completion is also important and available. And when methods are involved, it is also a built-in feature to do hinting of the parameters of such methods or functions. Also, code folding is nowadays in code editors a common feature that's also available. And when you would bind this to a real development tool, so to speak, where you can execute code, then things like breakpoints also become important. So first of all, we are going to have a look at the ADV memo, which is a VCL specific component, briefly discuss its architecture, and also give you an overview of the additional components that come with the family of ADV memo components. ADV memo is actually a native, 100% native VCL custom control. That means that as a VCL control, we implement all the keyboard and mouse responses, and the drawing of that memo, the rendering of that memo is fully done in native Delphi code as a VCL custom control. And to enable that this memo will work for different types of languages or data, there is an architecture or a mechanism implemented that there is a styler component. This styler component or class is responsible for holding all the specifics of the language or data. And with this specific information, the coloring of the text is applied. And here you can see on this screenshot, as a first introduction, what it is all about. You see the TADV memo, which is part of the TMS VCL UI pack. And here you see it with Pascal code syntax highlighted, so you can clearly see the Pascal keywords like procedure, var, begin, end, etc., that are drawn in a specific color. Also the points and etc. are drawn in red. So this is Pascal specific highlighting that is applied. The ADV memo is meanwhile a family of components centered around this ADV memo, which is a non-database aware memo component with an interface that is identical to the standard VCL memo. So it functions as an easy replacement for a D memo. We have the DB aware version. So for people who use it in a database situation where your code snippets, for example, are kept in a database, then you can use the DDB ADV memo and simply link to a block field that holds the code that should be handled in the memo. We have several styler components, for different languages, and this includes Pascal, CSS, HTML, Visual Basic or Basic, SQL commands, C#, Python, Perl, and a few others. There's also the TADV code list, which basically is a list box that can hold code snippets. And each snippet within this code list is also drawn with syntax highlighting. The TADV memo source that we will briefly cover in the coding that will follow is a component to manage code or text independent from the memo. And this enables you to have just one memo component and switch between different sources. And this way, keep your memory footprint really low, because there is only one memo control in your application, and the code that you show in that memo is kept in the memo source. And so the memory requirements are just the minimal memory requirements that are needed for storing the text in these memo source components. And then there's one memo control that is shared to edit, view all these different sources. The styler manager is a non-visual component. Its purpose is to bind file name extensions to specific syntax styles. That means that, for example, we can bind the .pas file extension to the Pascal styler component, and other stylers like HTML bind that to the HTML styler, and so on. And that means that when using this styler manager, you don't need to bother or do anything special. When you let the user open a file, it detects the file extension itself and will apply the proper syntax styler for the language that is chosen or opened. There's a spell checker component that, when connected to the ADV memo, it can do spell checking on the text in the memo and underline with red curly lines if it detects some spelling mistake. The multi-file memo is a component that allows you to edit multiple sources at the same time in a paged control. And it offers this in a way that you have to write virtually no code. So whereas if you use the memo source or multiple memo sources with one ADV memo, you still have to write the code to switch the memo and bring the proper tabs in place, etc. The multi-file memo control does that all for you. The memo PDF IO is a non-visual component that allows you to export your code with syntax highlighting applied to a PDF file. Out of the box, we also have HTML export, so you can export your code also with syntax highlighting to an HTML file. And finally, there are the toolbar components and ribbon toolbar components that allow you to build user interfaces where from a toolbar you can open files, do clipboard operations, and so on. And so also here you have no code to write. You simply drop the toolbar component on the form, connect it to the memo, and you are up and running. No code to write at all. And so it's more than time, I think, to have a look at our Delphi IDE and to show you some things about the ADV memo first. And then, of course, in the second part, we are going to have a look at the FNC memo and talk a little bit about the differences and the pros and cons. So here we have the ADV memo on our form. I will make it a little bit bigger and set anchoring so that I can easily let it grow when I size the form. I will also add a button, as I will need that in a moment. And that I will use to load some files. So here we are. So this is our memo component. As I explained, there is the lines interface, and through the lines property, just like you have in the VCL standard memo, you can load text in this ADV memo. So here I could, for example, write some text, and it is already at design time usable. What do we have more? Quickly covering some highlights, auto completion settings, active line settings. So with active line, you can highlight, for example, some specific lines in the memo. For example, the line where your cursor is, that can become a fully visible line. When I will run it, then like this, you can see that the line where the caret is supposed to be is highlighted or shown in a different color to emphasize where exactly you are editing in this memo control. Accept files, for example, is when enabled, the property that controls that you can simply drag and drop files on top of the memo and it will open them automatically. Some configurations about parameter hinting and delays when to show the parameter hints, etc. Blocks, code blocks. So in Pascal, our code block is, for example, everything between begin and end. We can also highlight such blocks, and properties that control things like coloring of blocks can be found here. I also want to briefly mention the gutter. The gutter is the left part of the memo that you can see here, left side. It holds by default the line numbers of code in your memo, and there are a few extra options that you have in the gutter. You can control the width of the gutter. You can also use it to mark what lines are modified or added while you are adding or coding into this memo. And you can control the formatting of the line numbers that appear. Of course, when you don't want a gutter, you simply switch it off by setting visible to false. One important thing that we will want to introduce is the syntax styles. So as you can see, this is a property that is a reference to another component in this case. And if we have a look at the component or the tool palette, and I choose here syntax or memo styler better, you can see the list of all the stylers that are available. So let's use for our example Pascal styler. We will also want to use an HTML styler, and I also want to have a memo styler. And what I will do first is, let's focus on Pascal. That's our beloved language. And so I bind the Pascal styler to the syntax styles property like this. So by doing this, my memo will automatically style everything according to Pascal. And let's load one of the bigger files into this memo, and therefore I have prepared, as you can see here, the source code of the ADV memo. So with the ADV memo, we will edit, in this case, the ADV memo.pas source code file. So this is the path to the file, and it does not take more than this to open this in our ADV memo. I press load, and here is our code. And as you can see, it holds all the source code of ADV Memo, and as you can see, it performs the syntax highlighting. Maybe let's have a brief look at the Pascal Memo styler. What does that do? That descends from the custom memo styler and holds all settings that apply to the definition of the Pascal language. Among these are, for example, what is a code block? A code block can start with these words, for example, and a code block ends with the word end. That is what we are used to as Pascal developers. An hex number, for example, has a prefix or an identifier with a dollar sign. In other languages, that might be 0x, for example. Also, things like how are comments specified that are rendered in gray, and that is indicated with the line comment or the multi-line comment left and right symbol that you can also specify. Also important is what we find in all styles, because this is a collection of as much items as you want, where you can apply coloring as you want. And here is an important one, which is the Pascal keyword list. So that's a style element, and you can see here the entire list of Pascal keywords. And if we have a look under font, you can see here that this is drawn in green. You can change that if you want that to be drawn in another color. That's not an issue. You can customize this. We have here simple quotes, so the single quote for strings, for example, strings that we also color in blue in this case, or the double quotes, symbol delimiters, so that the point, comma, the normal comma, etc. These are all available here. And here we have, as we have in Pascal, multiple ways to specify multi-line comments. We can also insert a style element for the different types of multi-line comments. Another one that I wanted to mention under the styler is the region definitions. Region definitions are used for code folding, and region definitions is a collection of specifications of types of regions within your code that you will want to use for code folding. So here, for example, you see a first type of a region that starts with procedure, and the region begins then with the word begin, ends with the word end, and it is a region of the closed type. That means the end, region end definition is really the end of the code block. And in a similar way, we have other types of code blocks like the constructor, the destructor, an interface, the unit as a whole can also be a region, the implementation section, interface section, try, end blocks, etc. So these are all regions. And these are preset defined by default for the Pascal styler. If I now load my Pascal file and I would enable the code folding by simply setting to true, these region definitions will be used to apply the code folding. And as you can see, if I go down, you can see now, first of all, that my Pascal keywords are shown in this pink color instead of green, and you can see the nodes through which I can perform the code folding, and these are the simple procedure code blocks that I can code fold this way. Okay, let's now have a look at introduce different types of files, and the second one would be HTML files. So if we would load an HTML file, and we will start by loading this one, copy as path, and I paste it here, remove this double quotes. What I will also do is set my syntax styler to the ADV HTML memo styler this way. And code folding, that's not really useful or commonly used in HTML, but here we have our HTML file. And you can see that the different HTML elements are highlighted according to the HTML standards. I have an alternative HTML file because I want to show that in some syntax styler there's also code formatting. And one of the HTML files I have is a compressed HTML file. So that means that all these spaces and line breaks are removed to reduce the size of this HTML file. And when I load it, you can see everything is on one line. And of course, that's not really readable for us human beings. So what I do to deal with this and make it readable is use the auto formatting capabilities of the styler. So I set the auto format to true, and I will apply the format method. And let's have a look at the result when I do this. On the same file, you can see that automatically this compressed HTML is now rendered as human readable HTML. So that's also one of the possibilities of stylers when they have an auto formatting capability. The same applies actually to JSON. I also have here a JSON file, one which is formatted and one which is unformatted. I can show that to you in Notepad. This is an unformatted JSON file, and this is a formatted one. Open with Notepad. This is the nicely formatted one. So let's see what the memo can do with an unformatted JSON file. So I replace it here. And of course, I need to use the JSON memo styler and set the JSON memo styler auto format to true. And let's see what happens. And here is our normally unformatted JSON. This file, sorry, it's this file. You can see that it is rendered nicely readable as this JSON in the ADV memo. So that also belongs to the possibilities of the ADV memo. Let's have a look now at code completion. And let's do the code completion with Pascal. So what I do is I assign my Pascal styler to, and it is already assigned to the syntax styles of the ADV memo. And what I can do now, I can specify the code completion in different ways. One of the ways to do that is to do that dynamically by the event onGet auto completion list. So this event is triggered as you are typing when the code completion should show up, and it passes as the first parameter the token. The token is the text that is before the caret. So the text that you expect to autocomplete is returned here in this parameter a token. And a list is a string list of possible suggestions to complete. Now we will keep it very basic, and I will simply add to this list, for example, output debug string. And when I run this application, and I can start typing some code here, and I have typed the first matching letters of output debug string, and so you can see that you can complete like this. In Pascal, we have already a couple of built-in words to complete. You can also see that my output debug string is always appearing. That's very simple because I always add it to the auto-completion list regardless of the token. Normally, I would need to write a function here that checks for the first characters of all the matching strings. This is with respect to code completion. There's also something like parameter hinting, and that is show you a list of parameters that one can add. To make that more clear, I will add one more method that will show up for auto-completion, which is the sum method. And here I will check if I'm using the sum function. And so if my token is sum, then I will return the possible parameters of this function. And a sum is typically the addition of two numbers. So I set the parameter hint to, for example, value, or no, I make it more simple, integer and another integer b. That will be the parameters of my sum function. And I set handle to true because this is what I wanted to return for my sum function. So if I press SU, I have the sum, and now you can see that I have these two parameters possible that is shown in the hint. You can see the first parameter highlighted, and then I see the second parameter highlighted when I have typed it. And this way you can fully customize the experience of auto-completion and parameters for certain functions for your auto-completed functions. And one more thing within this memo is showing you what you can do with breakpoints and or bookmarks. What I will do for that is implement the onGutter click event. So this is an event when I perform a click in the gutter area. And so what I do here is I will add a breakpoint at the line where I clicked. So the line number where I clicked is returned, and I will simply add the function here to toggle a breakpoint at that specific line. So that's how simple it is. And let's load. Okay, this is maybe the wrong code to load. JSON cannot really have breakpoints. But you can see that I can work with breakpoints this way. And I can do something similar, but maybe let's load something that makes more sense for this example. So I load the ADV memo again with, and I will leave out these and use the default Pascal memo styler. And from a button, we will add a bookmark. So what I can do is ADV memo and then bookmarks at some specific line. Let's hard code it to line 100 where I put the first bookmark. And okay, let's give this button some sense. Bookmark. Okay. And let's run the code. I load it, I add the bookmark, and let's move to line 100. Okay, here you can see the lines are zero based, so that's why I see here visually the bookmark at line 101. And I can do something like ADV memo 1, go to bookmark, my first bookmark. It's the first one that I added, and I expect it to go to line 100 bookmark, and it did not immediately go to bookmark. Not sure, maybe, not sure why it is not immediately going to line 101, but that's in any case what is the purpose of go to bookmarks, that is to move your memo automatically to the right position. All right, then I wanted to show you the multi-file capabilities. Let's close this project. Well, I don't really want to save it. But let's move on to this next thing that I prepared. And that is this demo here. So what do we have? We have the ADV multi-file memo. And I have a styler manager. And you can see in my styler manager, I have references to 3, in this case, syntax stylers. I have the HTML one, the JSON one, and also the Pascal one. And I have hooked up the styler manager to the multi-file memo via the here the styler's custom property. So basically that means, as you can see here, my Pascal styler has as extensions defined the PAS, DPR, DPK, and INC extension. My HTML styler has HTM and HTML extension specified, and my JSON styler has JSON as a file extension specified. So basically, by attaching this styler manager to the multi-file memo, the memo or the multi-file memo can find out what styler to apply depending on the file extension that was used for opening a file. So here, the only thing that I have to do is open memo file for this multi-file memo control. And as you will see, the component will by itself find out what styler to use. And that was not the intention, okay? That was a late change in my naming of files. And okay, I gave it a more simple name, web.html, and now it should work out of the box. So you can see that it automatically opened these files in a paged control. And you can see that for the JSON file, it applied the JSON styler. For my Pascal file, I'm still the standard in Pascal style mode. And my HTML is styled with the HTML styler component. But that shows you how you can deal with multiple files easily and also have the proper styler applied for each of these file types. You can also, let's say, programmatically deal with multiple files within a single memo, and then come the memo source components into play. So what I do for this is I have one single ADV memo, and I will drop multiple memo source components on the form. I will need 2 like this, and we also wish to have a Pascal styler and an HTML styler. HTML memo styler, okay. And what I do is I connect the Pascal styler to the first memo source, and I connect the HTML styler to the second. And now I will load my memo sources. Load from file, and Then, of course, I need my file paths, the second memo source, and I want to load them first one from the advmemo.pos file, like this. And the second one will be my HTML file. And I use this file name here. And now nothing will happen yet. What I should do, of course, to make something visible in the ADV memo, the single memo instance that I have here, I need to assign the memo source. So I will first of all visualize the Pascal file. So let's have a look. And as expected, you can see that my Pascal file is shown here in the memo. And what I will do now, let me have a look. The Pascal file and the memo source. And of course, I need to assign my Pascal memo styler. Second one is the HTML file and uses the ADV HTML memo styler. And now I show you how you can quickly switch between these two memo sources. And let's give this a simple name. That will be Pascal, that will be HTML. And when I click these on click, I can do something like this. Is radio group 1.item index. If it's the first item, then I set my memo source to the ADV memo source 1 and memo source 2 for the HTML file. So that's actually how easy it is to deal with multiple files in a single ADV memo instance. And so I can edit here, I can switch to the HTML file. And if I go back, well, let me make that more clear. ADV memo, let's change this to live in webinar. I switch to HTML, and we switch back to Pascal. Everything that I edited, changed, modified in the memo source is kept in the memo source. So through one ADV memo instance, I can quickly switch between multiple sources and create a real memory-friendly multi-file editor this way. Okay, and let's finish this part of the ADV memo, the VCL one, with what we have for the toolbars. And we have defined here in the tool palette the memo editing toolbar that I have. And then also the edit toolbar, editing and edit toolbar. That's in the wrong position. Edit toolbar for the memo, and now it's better. So with this toolbar, I immediately have most common functions available for working with my memo. And these toolbars have a memo property through which I connect the toolbar to the memo component. And you can see that it has automatically preset this property to the memo it found on the form designer. And that means that when I run this application, I did not write a single line of code. I can clear the memo. I can choose the file open, and let's see what I can open here. In my memos folder, I can choose here all files. No, I would expect more files to appear. Okay, ADV memo. And as you can see, I can immediately work with these toolbar buttons to perform also clipboard operations, undo and redo. That's also something we have not covered, but in the scope of 1 hour, it's a little bit too much. But also undo, redo, of course, are integrated in the memo, and also find and replace dialogues that is out of the box there to interact with this memo. And with this, I have shown you, given you a quick, brief introduction to the ADV memo, the VCL native component for syntax highlighting your text. And that brings us to the second part of this webinar today, which is about the TMS FNC memo, its counterpart. And it's a newer version of a syntax highlighting memo. And so let's have a look at what it brings and how it was architected. It is architected in a completely different way. It is actually based on a browser engine. So we use in the background browser engine to do, let's say, all the hard work for this syntax highlighting memo. Within this browser engine, we have a JavaScript editor running, and actually this is the Monaco JavaScript editor engine, the one that is also used in the immensely popular Visual Studio Code. And we have also for other purposes a bridging technology between native Object Pascal code and the browser engine, the bidirectional bridge. That means that from Object Pascal code, we can control what is happening in this browser engine, but also we can react in our native Object Pascal code to JavaScript events happening in that browser engine. If we talk about that browser engine, well, first of all, it's important to note that the FNC memo is a cross-platform, cross-framework component. That means that the FNC memo will work in a VCL application, in a FireMonkey application for all the targets that FireMonkey supports, and as a bonus also in a WebCore web application. And for those of you using Lazarus IDE, the FNC memo can also be used from Lazarus. It is, as I mentioned, based on a JavaScript library running in a browser engine. Fortunately, the browser engine that is used is the standard part of the operating system. So we use what is already available, what is already installed on your operating system, and in the process, also not unimportant, it is also your operating system that maintains updates for this browser engine to keep it secure in case of holes that the vendors are finding. On Windows, we use the Edge Chromium engine, which is since quite some time now the default browser in the Windows environment. For Mac, it has been always the Safari browser engine. For Linux, it's the WebKit engine. It also works on a Raspberry Pi, where also the WebKit browser engine is used, and also for mobile devices, FNC memo can be used, where on iOS it uses the Safari engine, and on Android it uses the Chrome engine. As I mentioned, the JavaScript library that does all the work is the Monaco editor, and it's an open source JavaScript library. It comes with the MIT license, which means that it is completely free for you with no strings attached to use in your applications, whether it are free or commercial applications. And as I also mentioned, it is the heart of Visual Studio Code, the cross-platform editor from Microsoft. If you haven't used it, it is a very powerful code editor with thousands or hundreds of thousands of extensions that can make your programming life easier. And as a bonus, Microsoft Visual Studio Code is also running on Windows, on Mac Linux directly, and even lately also directly from the cloud. But okay, let's go back to Delphi, because after all, we are Delphi developers. This is a screenshot that shows you the FNC memo in action with Pascal Code Styler. So you can see that the Pascal keywords we are so used to are shown in a different color. The languages supported by this Monaco JavaScript library, the list is immense, and here it is. And so I think you will be able to find your language that is supported by the Monaco library. And so, of course, as you can see here, the Pascal language is, of course, also supported. And that brings us to, of course, having a look at this FNC memo. So I will create a new VCL application, and I can drop the memo on the form. And as you can see, it also has a lines interface. I will increase the font a little bit because by default that font is a little bit small, especially for a webinar. It also has a lines interface, so similar to a standard VCL memo, you can simply interact with it, put text in it with the lines t-string list interface. It comes with numerous options. I give you a brief overview here. So this is a short overview of all the options that you have, but we will have a look in detail at it. One of the most important options here is the language. And so this is basically the equivalent of the syntax styler that you have with ADV memo. Only here you have this long list of languages that are supported. Basically, if you just open a Pascal file, it will, with this language setting, already apply the syntax styling to Pascal. And maybe that's what we just need to do as an introduction. And there's an important difference here. That is that this component is based on a browser engine. And that means that we can only start interacting with that browser engine when the browser engine is ready. The browser engine takes somewhat more time than a standard P custom control. And so the uninitialized event is triggered when the browser is ready to get going. And from there, from this event, we can do something like load from file. And let's load the same file in this FNC memo, copy as a path, and pass it as this parameter here. And we have our first memo with here Pascal code and the Pascal syntax applied. So you can see keywords colored in different, in blue, and text in other things. What the difference that we immediately notice here is the code map. So that is something that is available in the FNC memo that we do not have in the ADV memo. Okay, so that's an important difference. The code map that, of course, if you don't want it, you can also disable it under options. Here you find, where is it? There is a property where you can, with the minimap, you can actually have it automatically hide, for example, or not show. So that is a feature that you can enable or disable. By default, it is enabled. Okay, code completion. That is also something, of course, that we expect. from a syntax highlighting memo, and that is also available in the FNC memo. So here is a list of words or methods or whatever that can be auto-completed, that you can programmatically add through this list, but you can also do it through an event, and that is to do it dynamically in code. And that means that when the memo wants to auto-complete, it will trigger the onGetCodeCompletion event. And from here, in a similar way as we did for the ADV memo, we can also add items to the custom code completion list. We do that with the add functions. And here, for example, I can also add output debug string. And here, the second parameter specifies what type of element it is that is being added. So as you can see here, there's a quite extensive list of types of text that are being added as auto-completion. I will choose here that we will add a method because output debug string is a method. Let's add some more, like sum, for example. That's also a method. And maybe I will also need to add the show message, for example, three methods. And when I run this, maybe I need to disable the automatic loading of this large HTML file so we can see better what it does with this auto-completion. So I can type text here, and when I will now write output debug string, you can see that it automatically suggests to complete. Show message, for example. It's as simple as that to complete in the FNC memo. But we can do more with this auto-completion. We can insert full complete code blocks, actually. And I will show you how you can do that. We take the completion list and I add a new item, and I will add an item for loops, and the text to insert will be something like, well, let's keep it more simple. Do, begin, end. As you can see, I have added two things here, $1 and $2, and these are identifiers that specify when this code block is inserted, that these are insertion points where I can tap through for the developer to add something specific in that code. So I added this to the completion list, and let's see if it will do it for us. So you can see that with the for added, it already detects that here this for loop code block can be inserted, and so this way it is inserted. I think I made a mistake because it's not the dollar as a specifier, but it must be another symbol. And I apologize, but it's just another symbol that apparently needs to be used to be detected as the insertion point. But if you use the proper symbol, it will, of course, work and show you the insertion points where you can tap through it. And I'm quickly interfering here to correct this small oversight. So for inserting code snippets with parameters, the syntax indeed is based on $1, $2, $3, etc. So this is how you insert these parameters. But critical is to set the property insert text rules to insert as a snippet. When you have changed the setting this way, run the application, And then you enter the for loop commands. You see that the insertion point is on the first parameter. You can complete it, press the tab key, and jump to the second parameter, and so on. Let's now also have a look at a similar concept there is in the FNC memo to deal with multiple sources and only have a single FNC memo instance to keep your memory footprint low. And what I will do for this is I will add a button, and from this button, let's add some add source from file. And again here, we need to use paths. So my paths I can copy from here like this. And let's also add my HTML file like this. So what I do here, the FNC memo actually has a collection of sources, so that's built into the FNC memo components. And so I can load multiple source files into this collection of sources. And then with the active source property, I can easily switch between these sources. So it's a similar concept to the ADV memo, except that here we are using a built-in sources collection instead of the memo source component instances that we add. So let's add some items here, and this will be, let's say, source 1, source 2. Okay, and from my on click, I do something simple like FNC memo dot active source, and this will be the index of my radio group. So now the sources are loaded. It shows us the first source by default, which is the Pascal file. And when I click now here between these two, I can immediately switch between all the sources that I have loaded into my sources collection. To finish here, also things like find and replace are automatically built in this JavaScript library. You can also disable that and have your custom native find and replace dialogues, but it's just convenient that this is also directly built in, and especially if you want to offer experiences to your users that might be familiar with Visual Studio Code, that can come as a bonus or a benefit that the standard user interface elements are also usable up here within your FNC memo. I mentioned that the FNC memo is a cross-platform and a cross-framework component, and I have showed here a VCL application, but when I create from Delphi a multi-device application, so that's a FireMonkey application, this same FNC memo is also immediately available from here. So here I can choose or add all the targets that I wish, and it will just work as is in other operating system targets. So everything that I have shown for the VCL application is of course also applicable to this FireMonkey cross-platform application. But there is more. It is also usable from a TMS web core application, and maybe if I do not bother you by taking some extra time, I will build it from the ground up. So here we have a new web core application, and I can add the FNC memo to it. Here it is on my web core form. And what I will do here is add a file upload, because of course I need access to a file to make it editable in my FNC memo, and I need to get that into my browser. And uploading it is one specific way that I can use to do that. If I have dropped a file, what I can do with this web file upload component is from the files that are dropped, and let's assume that we drop one file by one, I can get that file as text. Also, if I drop the binary file, get that as binary data, but here in this case I'm only interested in text files, obviously, and what I will do is assign this text to the memo. And so here, that's all we need to do in our web core application. Let's run this application. So it creates a Pascal based application, and I bring the browser in view. I have my upload area here, and let's pick our ADV memo file. That's a challenging file. That's like you've seen it, 600K source code file, but it is here immediately in our browser. And from here, we can start editing this file. So you have this memo syntax highlighting memo experience immediately running out of browser, a web application. So also that is something I think spectacular to see, to have in web applications. And that brings us back to our slides, where I give you a final overview, comparison, so to speak, of the two memos, one to another. So on the left side, the ADV memo, to summarize, it's a Windows-only VCL component. It's a lightweight component. It's also architected to keep everything with a low memory footprint, that you can have one memo control that will deal with multiple source files that are managed by memo source components. It has fine-grained controls over styles, so more fine-grained actually than the FNC memo. I showed you how, for example, you can change the color of keywords in Object Pascal language. While technically that's also possible in the JavaScript Monaco library, it's somewhat more involved and cumbersome, but these things are all available in the ADV memo stylers. It comes also with additional helper components, for example, the DP ADV memo, the multi-file editor, etc. So that's also something that at this point the ADV memo still has as a benefit. And of course, it is and remains a 100% Object Pascal solution, 100% native code. Looking at the FNC memo and its advantages, of course, in the first place, it is a cross-platform, cross-framework component. It can be used everywhere where you can target your Delphi applications to. And that includes web applications, as you have seen. So any target you want to achieve, you can with the FNC memo. You've also seen that it has a very long list of languages supported, longer actually than what is available out of the box in the ADV memo. There's also a wider type of fonts supported. That is maybe something that I overlooked with the ADV memo, and that I forgot to mention, which is that the ADV memo requires that you use a fixed width font. That is a font where all the characters of that font have the same width. This is for a specific reason. This is because you also have some features like a column selection. And when you want to have column selection, it is a requirement that all text aligns on the same places where columns are. That's the reason why there is this requirement for fixed width fonts. We have done all the demos with the Courier font. The Consolas font is also such a font. And the FNC memo control is somewhat more flexible with respect to dealing with fonts. The look and feel of this memo is, of course, identical to what you have in Visual Studio Code. And for some people, it can be an advantage of familiarity. Um, we are also here reusing an existing and a proven JavaScript library. Visual Studio Code is also proven to deal with large, complex, whatever files with many languages, and we get all that as a benefit from that Monaco JavaScript library. And as that library evolves, that is also in continuous development, we will also take advantage of whatever comes in the future as improvements. The minimap is also something at this point that is a unique feature of the FNC memo, and this insertion of complete code blocks with programmable insertion points is also something specific in this FNC memo. That is, in a nutshell, summarized the, let's say, the strong points of both components. And that brings us more or less in time to our Q&A section. I see in our chat box there are already some questions. I see here as a first question, are the new functions in VCL or FNC components? If that question is somewhat more broad intended, the question is that we do new development to VCL and FNC components all the time. Our VCL UI pack has approximately bi-weekly updates where we add functions, improvements all the time, and a somewhat similar thing for FNC. If it's also in continuous development, there are at this moment actually no, I'm wrong, three big new FNC components in the pipeline. I cannot talk about it yet, but I'm convinced that at least two of the three will see the light in this year, 23. And so, of course, I'm excited the moment that we will be able to reveal these two new FNC components. The nice thing about our FNC architecture is that with one development, we can immediately give you solutions that are cross-platform, cross-framework that you can use everywhere. That's the nice thing, and that's why we are so passionate about also the FNC framework. But as I said, VCL has a long history, has an enormous amount of customers, users using these components, and are also continuously being worked on. Other question that I see in the chat box is, can I use the ADV memo in C++ Builder? The answer is yes. It is a VCL component. It is written in Delphi, but as a Delphi component, it is also perfectly usable from C++ Builder. The same actually applies to the FNC memo. Also, the FNC memo is usable in a C++ Builder application. Another question I see is, can I use Visual Studio Code plugins within this FNC memo then? The answer here is no. At this moment, this is not possible. The reason is quite simple. The reason is that Visual Studio Code IDE itself exposes a quite extensive API with which the plugins work. And as we have not exposed all these APIs, the plugin obviously will not work with FNC memo. Would actually be an extremely cool concept to make that possible, but that will require quite some work to achieve that. Another question here is, can we override the code formatting rules? I think, well, I can answer this. For the ADV memo, the answer is yes. For the FNC memo, the answer is that you have flexibility to override the code completion, for example, but the formatting rules itself at this moment cannot be overruled. These are the built-in rules that come out of the box with the Monaco editor. Can I define a styler for a custom language, so for a completely different or new language? That is possible in the ADV memo for sure. You descend from the ADV memo custom styler. You add your own keywords, your own regions for code folding, your own specifications for comment lines, etc. And you can do that for your own type of language. It is more involved for the FNC memo. And so what I suggest is I will give that as a feedback to the team that we have a look at preparing a demo of how you can do that, because it is more difficult, more involved. And with that, I see at this moment here in our chat box no new questions. I give you maybe some more seconds time in case you still have a question. Know, of course, that you can always contact us via email or in our support center, where you can also ask any further questions that might come up while playing with either the ADV memo or the FNC memo. Okay, I think I see no more questions, and that leaves me to thanking you for being here. I'm happy that we, after the summer break, are back with webinars. We plan to bring much more webinars in the coming months. It's also important for us to hear your feedback. So send us an email if you have any topic you want to see covered in any of the upcoming webinars. These are more than welcome. I'll be more than happy to work on your topics, and I'm excited, looking forward to bring you future webinars in the coming months, and also in the process reveal what the team here is working hard on. I'm sure you will be as excited as I am. So I would say stay in touch, follow our communication via social media, via our newsletter, and you will know as first what's coming next. And meanwhile, I wish you a further great day. Have fun with programming in Delphi. Just live your passion coding, and see you in a next webinar. Till the next time, thank you and bye-bye.